We're studying the book of Nehemiah. It seems very strategic in the season of life where the walls of Jerusalem had been broken down, the people have been displaced, now they're coming back and they're finding the need to be restored. And that's our theme for this early part of 2023 is restored. We've come through great trials and challenges in the world. This morning, we wake up to another report of a tragedy in the Los Angeles area. Someone who went into a ballroom dance facility and killed at least 10 people and wounded 10 others. Happened last night in Southern California. It's sad we keep waking up to these kind of tragedies and these kind of broken down moments that we're in. We need to be restored. Yes. Our world needs some restoration. Our community needs restoration, and it comes through understanding God and who He is and what it means to become followers of Him. The theme today as we study chapter 4 in the book of Nehemiah is this one simple truth: God is for you. That seems almost too simple to make it a whole point of a gathering here today, but yet it's profound. There are times that we wonder if He is for us. We can go through great challenges and great trials and wonder where God went. Is He there for me? Sometimes we think He's certainly there for other people, but what about me? Why am I going through the challenge that I'm experiencing? There are times in life when we need to call for help. Nehemiah answered that call. The people of Israel and the city of Jerusalem was in great disrepair. Nehemiah was a part of that tribe, but he was 1,000 miles away, serving as the cupbearer to the king Artaxerxes in the land of Persia. When he heard about the need, he began to pray, and he felt God speak to him to come and help. He left that place under the favor of the king, who gave him permission to go. And then Nehemiah started calling many others along the journey. Would you come and help? People that had been a part of the Israeli community for years but had been displaced. It's like, let's come back. Let's come together. And he called people from all kinds of locations to arrive back at the city of Jerusalem and let's rebuild the walls together. He called for help. We see that in chapter 3. All of the people are named. Many groups that are named who come and begin to build the wall. And when we come to chapter 4, we discover that they come under great duress. Even as they're trying to do something great, the enemy is coming against them. This is the reality for how life works for all of us. When we choose to do something great, when we choose to get on the right path, we're going to come under duress. We're going to come under challenge. There's going to be stresses. There will be attacks that the enemy brings. Charles Spurgeon once said this statement: God had one son without sin, but He never had a son without trial. Jesus never sinned, but He was under a great trial. He suffered a lot on His journey here for the 33 years of His life. He never sinned, but He was not kept from trial. He was under great duress many, many moments in His earthly ministry, and the attack that was coming against Him was great. And He said to us, we're going to have some trials too. James 1 verse 2 says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." This is a curious statement that is made here in this book that is written to us to glean from its wisdom. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. I've experienced some trials of various kinds. My first reaction isn't, oh, thank you, Jesus. My first reaction is not, oh, how exciting this is. I'm so happy to have this trial in my life. That is not my first reaction. I'm Sure, I'm not guessing too amiss by thinking that you're like me. When you have a trial come your way, it's not like you jump up and down and go, this is going to be awesome. We're looking to get rid of that trial. We're looking to get out from under that burden. We don't like it. There's not a trial I've ever encountered that I liked. It wasn't like I'm wanting more. Just send me the trial. Our prayers all the time are to be delivered from trials, to be delivered from temptations, to be delivered from oppression, to be set free from all the mess that we're in. He says we're going to have them. Jesus said in this world you'll have tribulation, but he says the same thing, be of good cheer. I've overcome the world. It's just such a weird reaction to trouble, is to count it all joy. And to realize that that trial is actually going to work out something good in us. That is something that I'm continuing to learn. My years are adding up, and as I add up those years, it doesn't sound good in my head. I don't feel as old as the number. I'm thinking I'm a lot younger in my head than I am on my birth certificate. It's weird. It just keeps shouting at me, that number, like, what in the world? How did that happen? But as those years mount up, one of the things I continue to learn, I'm learning it right now, is that the trials work out something that helped me grow. The trials work out something that if I can hold on to Jesus in the middle of it, if I can respond properly, if I can not get all messed up in my head and resentful and become angry and bitter and have the wrong reaction, if I can count it as, okay, God, I'm going to trust you and help me to find joy in the middle of this burden, that somehow it's going to turn out for good in my life, and I experience I'm actually growing. Yeah. Something good is happening. I hate it and I love it. Can you do both at the same time? Like, we're not asking for trouble, but when it comes, it's going to do something wonderful in our lives. Nehemiah knew he was in God's will. When he instructed the people to rebuild the walls around Jerusalem, he was in the middle of the will of God, doing all the right things. Yet he still experienced opposition and ridicule. He had to persevere through trials. You and I need to persevere through our trials. Don't get discouraged when those things come. I want to read the whole chapter 4, so hang in there with me. We're going to read through it. It all matters. It's a story, and we need to get the grip on this story, and then we'll wrap it up with some simple thoughts about how God is for you. I don't want you to leave here today wondering, questioning whether God is really for you. Now, when Sanballat heard that we were building the wall, he was angry and greatly enraged, and he jeered at the Jews. And he said in the presence of his brothers and of the army of Samaria, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore it for themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they finish up in a day?" He's just throwing insults. Like, who do they think they are? That they can do this and they're going to get this all done in a flash? He's a leader of Samaria, and they were not friends of the Jews. The Jews looked down on the Samaritans, and it was mutual. And here he is ridiculing them with his words. Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of rubbish and burned ones at that? There's another leader that tags on. Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him, and he said, "Yes, what they are building. If a fox goes up on it, he will break down their stone wall." He's saying it's so feeble. What they're trying to do, they don't even know how. And just a fox get up on there, the wall's going to... They're just ridiculing them. It's not even true what they're saying. And this is often how the enemy works. He tells lies to you about what's going on. Things are so bad, you're not going to make it. That's a lie. They're so feeble, you're going to be destroyed. If just one little thing happens to you, it's over. That's a lie. The enemies come against you with lies, and they're doing it here. Verse 4, "Hear, O our God, for we are despised." Now Nehemiah is praying again, and he's
offering his thoughts up to God. Turn back their taunts on their own heads and give them up to be plundered in a land where they are captives. Do not cover their guilt, and let not their sin be blotted out from your sight, for they have provoked you to anger in the presence of the builders. Nehemiah didn't try to do harm to his enemies. He left it in God's hands. And he said, God, you'll handle it. And he rested in that. Verse 6, so we built the wall, and all the wall was joined together to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. They were making progress. But when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites, I'm saying it the way I'm saying it. If I say it boldly, it'll sound right. So they heard that the repairing of the walls of Jerusalem was going forward and that the breaches were beginning to be closed, so they were very angry. And they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause confusion in it. And we prayed to our God and set a guard as a protection against them day and night. Now the enemy is not only hurling insults, they're gathering to actually come against them physically. So Nehemiah, with wisdom, decides to gather people to come as guards while some worked. In Judah, it was said, the strength of those who bear the burdens is failing. There's too much rubble. By ourselves, we will not be able to rebuild the wall. Hopefully we can read through this and hear it for how life is for us. These are very common themes. Sometimes we look at what's going on and think, man, I'm getting tired. I don't know if I can do this anymore. I feel beat down. I don't know if I can handle what's coming against me. By ourselves, we won't be able to do this. Our enemies said, they will not know or see till we come among them and kill them and stop the work. At that time, the Jews who lived near them came from all directions and said to us 10 times, you must return to us. So in the lowest parts of the space behind the wall, in open places, I stationed the people by their clans with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And I looked around and arose and said to the nobles and to the officials and to the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Don't be afraid of that enemy. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome. We need to remember the Lord who is great and awesome. We know that in ourselves we're weak and we can get insecure and we can wonder, all the things that are coming against us, are we going to make it? All these thoughts, all these lies, they're real and they affect us. But that's why we're here today, is to come back to a truth. The Lord is great and awesome, and to realize we're in this together. Look at what happened. They said 10 times, come on back, let's all get together. We can do this together. We can't do this alone, but we can do this together. The story we heard about Everyone Matters is a young lady with children that had been through life's hardships, had others come alongside and say, we'll help you. We can do this together. We can't do this alone. We're here today to do this together. We're here to say, come on, let's gather. We need to see all the more gather from all parts of this community and say, we're in this together. We can do this together. I can't do this by myself, but we can do this together. And we're going to fight because we care about the Lord's work and we care about each other. When our enemies heard that it was known to us and that God had frustrated their plan, we all returned to the wall, each to his work. From that day on, half of my servants worked on construction, and half held the spears, shields, bows, and coats of mail. And the leaders stood behind the whole house of Judah, who were building on the wall. Those who carried burdens were loaded in such a way that each labored on the work with one hand and held his weapon with the other. They were well prepared. Some were working, some were guarding, some were working and guarding. A trowel in one hand to build the wall back up, and a sword in the other in case somebody came along behind them. They were doing the work. They were constructing and they were defending. And they were doing it together. And each of the builders had his sword strapped at his side while he built. The man who sounded the trumpet was beside me. There were times when the trumpet would sound, that was a great battle cry, and if that were to happen, all of the soldiers would come together and they would defy and defeat the enemy. And so they had the person ready at hand with the trumpet. You know, we're here listening and waiting for that trumpet to sound. It's going to be a different reason the trumpet sounds next. When God says it's time, sound the trumpet, we're gonna be raptured out of. You know, I've talked to friends a lot. They're like, I'm ready for the end of days. I'm ready for this battle to be over. I'm ready to have the rapture happen and go on to heaven. Whenever someone says that to me, I'm like, amen. I'm ready for that too. We don't have any say in it as to when it happens, but we can sure be ready. And that trumpeter is in the camp, and God's going to sound that trumpet one day, and that battle cry is going to rally us all together. And I said to the nobles and to the officials and to the rest of the people, the work is great and widely spread, and we are separated on the wall, far from one another. Sometimes we feel like we can't see the others that are working. We feel alone. We need to be able to see one another. That's why we gather like this, because we're separated. We're spread out all week long. Now let's look at this. Look how many there are of us that are working together. We're not alone, and there's a great army to do the work that God has called us to do. I keep forgetting where I'm leaving off. 20, in the place where you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us. We're going to land there in a moment. Our God will fight for us. Our God will fight for you. This is personal. Your God, our God will fight for you. He is our source, and we are not alone, and He is all powerful, and He always wins the day. So you can rest assured, when He says He's going to fight for you, the battle's won already. So we labored at the work, and half of them held the spears from the break of dawn until the stars came out. I also said to the people at that time, let every man and his servant pass the night within Jerusalem, that they may be a guard for us by night and may labor by day. So neither I nor my brothers nor my servants nor the men of the guard who followed me, none of us took off our clothes. Each kept his weapon at his right hand. It's a curious statement, except to say they were busy and they worked until they got the job done. In like 52 days, they built the whole wall around the city. When I read this, how they didn't take their clothes off for all these days, it reminded me of a story. It's silly, but it just reminded me of it. My parents told me this story all my life. The first camp I ever went to, they would go at summer camp, and my dad would be a speaker sometimes at the summer camp. And one year, I would always go as a kid, a little kid with them. One year I went as a camper, and they let me actually go into the camp, dorms and such by myself. I was probably like third grade, maybe fourth grade. And as we ended the camp that week, and we were driving home in the car, my parents said they kept smelling this smell that wasn't great. And when we got home and they opened up the suitcase that I had for my camp experience, they discovered that I had not changed my underwear the entire week. So that actually reminded me of what they said. They didn't change their clothes. That's actually not a really good thing. And I've grown. And then COVID came, and you know what it's like during COVID, and you're working from home. You wear the same sweats every day. You didn't change your clothes for a week. And it wasn't because we were fighting necessarily. We were surviving. Anyway, it's just part of the meat of the word right there to share with you today. Following Jesus is not a pain-free exercise. There's trouble. There are trials. We need to be ready for those troubles and those trials. It is not easy. We'll go through tests. but it's worth it for the promise of what is to come. There are days we can feel discouraged, days when we feel like giving up, days when we wonder if we're going to make it through. I'm here to tell you, you will. Don't quit. You will make it through. There's a God who fights for you, and he will deliver you. It will turn out for your good. Don't quit.
Yes.
There's discouraging days. Those days come, but we discover the power of faith. It's where we learn how great our God is to see us through. The people of this world don't understand that God delights in using feeble instruments to get his work done. I feel weak. I don't feel able. I don't feel capable. And God says, perfect. Call on me. It's in our weakness that he makes us strong. When we realize how weak we are, but how strong he is, that's a great marriage right there. And he says, I will give you my strength. And in our weakness, he becomes our strength. And now we become the powerful person that he intends for us to be. And he gets the glory.
Yes.
The world glories in its wealth and its power, but God glories, God's people glory in their poverty and in their weakness. For when we are weak and we call on him, we become strong. 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong. You feeling it today? You feeling trials? You feeling troubles? You're in a good space. It's where we need to be, that we can say, I'm going to trust in God in the middle of my trial and see what he's about to do, because he is great and awesome in all his ways. And as verse 20 says, God fights for you. Romans 8:31, what then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? So let me break it down. God fights for you. God, the CEO, the president, the king, the supreme ruler, the absolute monarch, the czar, the emperor, the champion of all history. There's nobody greater than he. God, the God of heaven, the God of Abraham, the God of you. He's your God. He's all powerful. There's nobody above him. There's nobody equal to him. There's nobody that can rival him. There's nobody that can defeat him. God, the one who is all powerful, who is almighty, that God who is over everything, who created you, who has got it all worked out in the end, who has your future secure, that God is fighting for you. He runs interference. He provides cover. He's impeccably perfect. He's tirelessly strong. He's unquestionably capable. He's endlessly joyful. He's wise. He's willing, and he wins. God, that God. He fights. He deploys angels and surrounds us with his presence. He fights. He stands down Goliath and removes barriers. He turns water into wine. He feeds thousands with 5 loaves and 2 fish. He walks on water. He speaks peace to storms. He gives life to broken people. He raises people from the dead. This one who is himself raised from the dead fights. He fights. He fights. He intercedes for you. Jesus is ever making intercession for you. God fights for. What for? For your health, for your family, for your faith. When you question him, when you wonder, is this even real? What is religion all about anyway? Who is God? Is he there at all? God fights for your faith. He fights for you to understand him. He fights for you to realize he is there right now in your life. He's there to help you know him.
Yes.
He fights for your family. He fights for your faith. He fights for your restoration, and he fights for your future. God fights for everything you're about. Are the odds against you? Is the boss against you? Is the government against you? Oh, there's difficult things for sure, but God fights for everything to work out for your good. To those that are the called according to his purpose. He fights. God fights for you. Yes, you. You with the sordid past. You who's messed up so many times you can't count and you wonder what in the world. You. That's not a put off to him. He's attracted to broken people. He fights for you. You with the alcohol addiction. You with the absentee dad. You with the health challenge. You with the bad credit. You with the lack of a job. He fights not just for the rich, not just for the pretty, not just for the religious. He fights for you. For you. Put your name in there. God, the Almighty One, is fighting. He's got it all worked out. He wins all day long. He's fighting for everything you're about. Fighting for you. I guess the question of the day is, are you a you? Because if you're a you, then you're good to go. God fights for you. Building and battling are a normal part of the Christian life. It's a challenge. Nehemiah reminded the people that they were involved in a great work. They were serving a great God and rebuilding the walls of a great city. He also reminded them that they were not alone and that they needed each other, and he called for help. And it's good for us to call for help. It's good for us to know we're not alone. It's good to us to know we're not the only church in town. There's a great community of faith all over this city that God is building his church, and the gates of hell won't prevail against it. And we need each other. We need the church down the street. We need the church across the freeway. We need the church that's downtown. We need the church in South Sac, in North Sac. We need the church in Roseville and Folsom and El Dorado Hills. We need this church, and we need to all be together fighting for each other. This is who we are. This is what we do. And it's good to call for help and say, let's get this job done because God is fighting for us. Lord, we thank you for that you make all things well. And we trust you in this moment to make things well for each one in this room. That you are personal to us. You care about every one of us. Let your grace and your love rest upon our hearts, our minds, our souls today, powerfully.